Welcome to Real Life Mentoring, where we explore real life issues to help you make an authentic difference in the world.
Hi, it's Chris and Christina, and we are here today with our friends Todd and Jeannie. And I'm not even going to do 1 ounce of introduction. I'm just going to let you guys introduce yourself. Okay. So I'm going to, you know what, let me back up. Today we're going to be talking about past trauma and how past trauma informs how you go through your life as a married person, as a family person, as a work person, how past trauma affects. Is there anything you want to add?
Just that we just met you. Todd and I met.
We just met you yesterday.
No, we met you a few.
We were going for a walk down your neighborhood, and
who are you? Be on our podcast.
I met you a few years ago, just not in passing, but through a friend. But we had a short conversation, right. And it was through. We reconnected through some of the stuff you were going through. Yeah. I think I'd ask you about it, yeah. And so then we had dinner together as two couples, and I mean, so now you said in this office of ours doing a podcast about your trauma. Yeah. So I relate to some of what you're going to share today.
Yeah, we're excited for you to hear their story. This is just free. This has nothing to do with anything. But he had met you, and we just knew you as the coffee guy. Yeah. And when we were still in Vienna, he had gone to a coffee festival, and he said, I'm going to get this poster and bring it back to Todd the coffee guy. And so, like, you were sort of written into our story before we'd even met you guys.
But so unfortunately, I don't know what happened to it. We moved back with a few things, and I could never find it. So if I do find
still
it,
waiting on
I know. It was a small one.
Yeah. I'm sure it was lovely.
It's a thought that counts, Todd. Rude.
No, but I looked on my text with you recently, and we hadn't texted that often because we didn't know one another. But I was at this coffee festival in 2017 or 18, and I sent you a photo of the poster.
I remember that.
Okay. Anyway,
so there you go.
It's still
I
on
would
my.
have loved it.
It would have been nice to get it. So anyway, take it away.
Okay, so you guys introduce yourselves.
Okay. Well, we are Todd and Jeannie Vinson. Mm-hmm. We've been married almost 30 years in October of this year. We have 4 daughters and a son-in-law. Just in a huge range. We have, obviously. Our oldest is married. Our second oldest is in college, finishing up. She's in her senior year. Then we have one that is in YWAM, and she is overseas right now with her outreach. And then we have a freshman in high school. So currently just moved to Norman. So that's part of our story. But yeah, that's kind of us in a nutshell. Mm-hmm. There's a lot to unpack in there.
And how we got to Norman. Yeah. So you're now with Antioch in Norman, and you want to kind of share the journey, how we got here, then I can introduce myself.
I mean, yeah, so about a year ago, the Lord just began pursuing my heart about moving to Norman. I grew up here, my whole family's here, and we were really happy where we were. God had really restored a lot in us and done a lot of healing in the place that we were living, and we loved it. But God was like, I have something more for you, and I just want you to be obedient and surrender all your expectations, all the things that your plans, and I'm calling you to something different. And it was painful, and there were a lot of our story was kind of happening simultaneously to that. Todd's what he's going to share was going on at the same time, so there was a lot going on, but God was so faithful, so good, and just continued to open doors and just gently push us this direction. It was kind of a long process, but we moved here last summer, and it has been evident ever since that it's like exactly where we're supposed to be. Like, just so I could tell stories all day about how God has opened doors and how he has orchestrated things long before we needed them to be in place. And here we are. So that's kind of the end of the story.
We're telling it backwards.
We might be telling it backwards, so but that's fine.
Might be a good way to film a movie. We'll just tell the whole thing backwards.
Yeah.
So, I guess the obedience part, I wish it had been a little earlier or a little quicker for me. I mean, timing-wise, we were right here when we were supposed to be. And but Edmond for us was really a time of healing. Part of my story was that we founded a boys ranch and operated it and lived there for 20 years. And got to the point that I had just was just burnt out, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and so found ourselves in transition, and didn't transition well, but found ourselves doing something different. And part of that was transitioning from Willow Springs Boys Ranch to moving to Edmond, and then in the meantime there, really as a hobby, I'd started EOT Coffee out of my garage.
Okay.
And it went from a hobby to something that I've been doing full time.
For the listener who doesn't know, we're talking about Edmond, Oklahoma, and now
Yes.
Norman, Oklahoma,
Yes.
and EOT is EOTE.
Yeah, and it's an acronym.
Right, that stands for...
Ends of the Earth.
Right,
Inspired by Acts 1:8.
yeah. Go look it up, order it, buy it, tell people
good.
about it.
Yeah, it's been
Okay.
a great way to connect with people. And another way, another platform to pour into people, which is another mantra that I've come to appreciate through our journey.
Well, I think your journey has lots of stopping points and lots of different podcast episodes, but we want you to tell your story and jump in wherever you want, and just go.
Me start or
Yeah,
start?
no, you go ahead.
Well, I guess I've had a huge heart for kids since I was in high school. Went to college, got involved in Young Life, Kanakuk, FCA, all those things. Wanted to do something relationally that way with family and students. Doors kept opening up and opportunities came about that we were able to found a boys ranch with the help of Jeannie's family, and initially her great uncle and then other family members. And really it was providing a home for boys that didn't have one. They were in a crisis. Not really, some were their own doing, but a lot of them was because of just a family crisis. And so I was really excited about the opportunity and invited Jeannie to go out there and look at the property with me. And basically I said, that's great, but I'm not moving. We're going to live in Norman.
Okay.
How far away is this place you live?
From Norman, about an hour.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
But
And it might as well have been the moon for
Yeah.
as far as
Yeah.
it felt to me.
But we're out between Oklahoma City and Tulsa, in green country, rolling hills, and just really, really pretty, but way outside our comfort zone.
Okay.
Especially outside of Jeannie's comfort zone. And I'd lived overseas and traveled some, and I said, oh man, I'm between Oklahoma City and Tulsa. And like Jeannie said, I might as well put her on the moon.
Yeah.
So a lot of cultural changes away from your security and what's comfortable. And so lived there for 20 years. And I think for me, I came in one day and knew that I was stressed, knew that, obviously that, working with broken families is hard. But in that, I, me being a people person and a connector, I just started putting all those people and all those stories and all those burdens in my backpack and carried them until I couldn't anymore. I came home one day and was coming in the house that morning and found myself on the floor and thought I was dying of a heart attack. And
You physically had symptoms?
yeah, I was physically on the floor. I was physically knotted up in the fetal position, and the only thing I saw was my daughter's, literally, it's not a metaphor, I grabbed her Hello Kitty blanket and I was in the floor and I thought I was dying.
Wow.
And got to the hospital and realized that I wasn't dying,
Okay.
but it was stress and anxiety.
Wow.
And that was the moment, I affectionately call it my Hello Kitty blanket moment. I realized that things have got to change. I can't live this way anymore.
So was it you hit the wall?
Yeah.
Or Jeannie, did you see?
Yeah, I think looking back, when it happened, I was like, oh gosh, this is happening. But I think looking back, it had been going on for a while. Like I could see kind of this slow decline. Like he was losing weight, he was not eating, he wasn't sleeping. There was things, but I just was like, oh, we're just busy and we have a busy life and there's a lot going on and
this
that's
work
just
is hard.
part of it. And it's hard. We'd kind of just accepted that was just part of our story.
And you had all four girls plus
all four girls
navigating the
were going, and there were a lot of balls in there. Our daughter was graduating from high school, so we were in the middle of senior year activities, and we had actually at that point realized, I think earlier on, that it was time for us to start making a change and moving towards leaving the ranch. We didn't know how we were going to do that or what that was going to look like, but we had already had that conversation, so we knew we were kind of moving that direction. Still, a lot of balls in the air trying to decide when that was going to happen, how that was going to happen, where we were going to move, graduating our daughter. Just lots of things were in the works. And then, that's I think we got to, we were spring of my daughter's senior year, and that's when he hit a wall. And
that's when you collapsed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and someone who's become a good friend of mine, Jeremy Kubicek, had seen me, had come to our roastery warehouse in Oklahoma City and said, hey, I'm supposed to start spending time with you. And part of his company is giant worldwide. It's leadership and personal development. And one of the things he shared with me was, the 70-30 principle that his partner, Steve Cockram, came up with this principle, and it's that you should be spending 70% of your time doing things that are life-giving, that are your second nature, that your gifts, your talents, that you do really well. And if you spend 70% of your time doing those things, you'll have the capacity to do the 30% that just comes with the job, that aren't your gifts, that it's learned behavior. It's not something that comes natural. It takes a lot more energy to execute it, because you have to give a lot of effort and focus to do those things. And as Jeremy explained that to me, I was going, wow, I'm not 70-30, I'm about 20-80.
Wow. Do you think it started that way with the Boys Ranch?
No, I think as I had some self-awareness and started to learn about myself, being someone who is a connector and a creative and a pioneer, but not your typical pioneer. I'm a pioneer out of a driving relationship with people. And when you start something, you have to learn about all of it,
right,
and do it all. But what I realized was, visiting with Jeremy and some really good insights, was that once it got to the point that it was going to be operational, that's where I should have, looking back, I should have put other people in place to do the ops, and me not be the operator, but be the one that shares the vision, shares the story, gets out in front of that in the public and community. And what Jeremy shared with me was, Todd, you're literally running a hospital here, emotionally, spiritually, for people. And the rooms are full, the hallways are full, there's a waiting list to get in. And what God wants you to do is operate a clinic where and to use that metaphor, is that they come in and they go out. In fact, they go in and go out during the day. In fact, maybe within 30 minutes. But I kept putting all these people in my emotional backpack, that the pack got so heavy that finally it just like pancaked and just collapsed.
Yeah,
So
I would
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say.
I was just saying that I think that's the place where we realized we had found our identity in like what we were doing and how we were, we were helping all these people, and we were raising all this money, and that's where our identity was lying.
Sure.
And but we weren't really doing what God had really called us to. We would almost kind of like walked away or moved away from the original call to like, this is what I have for you. I think we thought we would live and die out there, but God just called us to start.
We almost did.
Yeah, and we almost did.
Yeah.
But God called us to start it, and He never said, you're going to finish this thing out. It's just, so I think we had kind of got to a place where we weren't living out the calling that God had for us. He was like, I have asked you to start this and just walk with me along the journey, and you have somehow kind of gone your own way and done your own thing, and you've taken on things that I was never asked you to carry. And so I think that's kind of was what we realized, is that we're not living out our giftings that God has given us. We were trying to do so many things out of our own strength in that season. So
yeah, and I think being a firstborn and in my own family story, I just had this uber sense of responsibility. And I keep talking about Jerry, and he said, Todd, you'll be surprised. People don't want you to be responsible for them. It never was your responsibility. It's theirs. And at different ages, kids have a different level of responsibility for themselves, but ultimately, God is responsible for them. And He said that in 2016, but just in the last month or so, He had recorded a couple of those conversations we had. We did a half-day intensive together, and He recorded 2 pieces of that conversation, and He said, hey, I just found these.
Wow.
I want to send them to you. Jeannie was out of town, so I basically just had a weekend at home, almost like a personal retreat, and I went through with my journal and started listening to those. And the conversation then was transitioning from the Boys Ranch into EOT full time. But now I'm sitting here almost 7 years in the future listening to this again. And it was just so hard even for me to even hear the sound of my own voice. Just the exhaustion, the pain, the fatigue, the brokenness. But I found myself in another transition from, operating the ranch to operating EOTE, and I was repeating that same pattern. And we're in an operations mode, not a startup and a founding role. Thankfully, this transition even though transition is just messy and awkward, but this one is so much better than the boys' ranch. We wanted to leave the ranch well.
Wait a minute, your wife is making a face. Uh-oh.
I don't think I think it was just as hard. I just think it was different. I mean,
maybe more compressed.
I think that there, and I don't know if you want to share this part of the story, but I feel like we kind of just touched the surface the first time of the trauma that had to be dealt with. And I think the second round this past year has gotten to the root of the trauma.
Well, let's talk about the root, because we say the trauma. Can you put a definition on the trauma?
Yeah, and clarify. The trauma was not the boys' ranch, right?
No.
I thought it was. I thought it was the situation there.
And I think that's why we thought, we took care of that. But then the second round creeped up and we were like, we're not at the ranch anymore. This can't be what caused all of this in the first place.
So let's clarify. You're at the ranch.
Yeah.
Burnout. You crash.
Yeah.
You deal with the crash. You move on. You think, okay, now we're with EOTE. Now, a year later,
It was like 5 years later.
Yeah, 5.
5 years later, a similar thing.
Right.
So what changed? What did you have to recognize? What's the part of the story that, or how do you define the trauma of both stories?
I think one, I looked up and I was so, emotionally frail, for lack of better. It's pretty accurate. I thought this was going to be my new normal, and I've got a strong wife that really believed in me more than I even believed in myself. That we're going to get through this. This isn't the new normal, and so part of me, I had to physically I had to be physically removed from the ranch, and 6 years in Edmond was just a time of healing, and I didn't think it was an identity issue. I think I'm just exhausted. And so really felt like the ranch was where we grew our family. Edmond was a place to heal me and in turn heal our family. But really we had just taken the root off the weed. And the
top off the weed.
Yeah.
Not the root. We didn't take the root out.
We hadn't touched the roots yet.
Okay.
They were still
we'll talk
way
about the root
down.
in a minute.
Yeah. We pulled the tops off the weeds.
Okay.
But never gotten down to those root issues. And I think you even had a picture at church.
Yeah, so this was probably this time last year. And I was seeing all the same patterns start back up. And
can you break down some of those patterns?
I just started, he wasn't sleeping again. Yeah. He was losing weight.
Dry heaves,
couldn't eat.
Feeling nerve endings all over your face and up and down your arms like you were being electrocuted. Just one ball of nerves.
Yeah. And just seeing some of the same patterns of I saw him putting people's emotions back in his backpack again. Okay. We didn't have the language for that, I think, at the time, but that's what was happening is he was taking on everyone's feelings, everyone at work, everyone within his family, everyone that, he encountered. If they had a issue or they were having a bad day, he was having a bad day. Gotcha. And he just would take it on. And so, it was about a year ago and all of those same patterns just started repeating. And we were making plans to move to Norman. We had already kind of moved in that direction. And our daughter was graduating. Our next daughter was graduating again. So
okay, no more children can graduate.
I know. I was like, stop this. Yeah. So
graduation shouldn't be traumatic. Yeah. But it was a mile marker.
So it felt, again, a lot of balls in the air. And I thought, how are we here again? I thought we dealt with all of this. And so we were in church one morning and during worship, and it was the most clear picture I've ever gotten. The Lord just kind of downloaded it to me. And it was basically a picture of Todd just standing there. But, like at the doctor's office where they have a body and it shows you all of the insides, like the veins and the organs and all of that. That's what I saw. And I saw just this root just wrapping itself around every part of him, his heart, his lungs, his brain, and just choking out. And what I saw was it was this seed that had been planted deep a long time ago. And it was bitterness, fear, and anger.
Which turned into anxiety.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what I saw. And then I saw on the outside kind of this watering can of things Todd was doing to like, okay, well, I'm going to water this with good things. I'm going to read my Bible more. I'm going to spend more time in prayer. I'm going to surround myself with all these great men, or, do all these things, just all the things that we had walked through. And I think we'll talk about that in a minute, just the things that we did do. And it was just pouring in, but like, it had nowhere to go. It just, it was the weed, that seed that had been planted had just overtaken. And so all the things that the good things he was trying to do just wasn't killing it. And I just felt like the Lord was saying that has to be completely ripped out. So I think that was the beginning of our journey of like, we've got to figure out what that deep root is. What is that seed that was planted a long time ago? And I think, we realized there was a lot of family trauma, a lot of family baggage that led to that.
Todd's original family.
Yes.
Okay.
That kind of planted that seed. And, it had taken 55 years to really grow and just overtake him. So I think that's where that's where the digging and the root pulling had to start from. So.
And Todd, was that a surprise to you? Did you cruise through life going, wow, things are fine? Or was that seed, did you know that seed even existed?
No, I was just the good boy at church that, you just worked hard and you always did the right things, through college and even starting this nonprofit as a, 26-year-old kid. You just bootstrapped it. Yeah, God called you to it and he was going to give you the provision and the opportunity, but there was also your part as well. And so, and I think where that came from was just at an early age, found myself in a position as a 15-year-old moving back to the States and living in a home with my grandmother, and she had been diagnosed with probably the 4th episode of cancer at that point. And so really what happened, I got deputized as a parent and wasn't really even aware how much that affected me until later. And if you just said, oh, that was a traumatic experience, I'd go,
You mean you were responsible to take care of your grandmother?
yeah, I mean, just to be the guy there in the house, and we
Okay.
both looked after each other, and it was pre-Twitter and
Yeah.
Where were your parents?
in the Middle East,
Okay.
in the oil industry, and so there wasn't a Zoom call or a FaceTime call, and so just being a firstborn and also going through that, I just always had a huge sense of responsibility. Which so if I didn't make a 4-point, I got an ulcer for making a 3.8.
Wow.
You did.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I could do 98% really well, but I would fixate on the 2% that I'd either let myself down, or I'd let you down, or let my church down, or my perception of someone may not even been the reality, but my perception was, oh, I've disappointed you. And so on the outside, it looked great. Man, you're really driven. You can start a boys ranch and a camp. You now started a roastery and a coffee shop. And, the hard work was championed, but it was an addiction and an identity that was purely conditional.
I was going to say, in the Christian culture, we'd say, oh, don't live to please people. But boy, when we do, we're patted on the back and rewarded for it.
Yes.
But when the plane's going down, they tell you to get the oxygen mask and put it on you first, and then start helping everyone around you. And really, mine was just the opposite. I rode that plane straight into the ground. And so you would think, I've got a master's in counseling from OU, you would think that I would have been aware of those things. But I wasn't aware until I was 5 to 7 years into a tailspin. Everyone could see me losing weight. I dropped down to, 188 pounds. I'm way north of that now. But I'd wake up heart racing, dry heaving, just all these psychosomatic symptoms that you would think that would be, I would see those lights on the dashboard going, something's wrong, but all the lights were flashing, and I was a complete wreck before I realized, something's off.
This isn't a criticism, but I want to ask Jeannie, though, all that's going on with you, because I've seen some of it in my own life, was he present for you and the girls?
I mean, I think it was because he has this sense of responsibility and taking on, it was just one more, he was just putting me in his backpack. It was just one more thing for him to think about. And I tried to, take away as much as I could, but we were in graduation mode and moving. And I was like, you have to be present. You don't want to have your kids have trauma later that my dad wasn't around when I was graduating from high school, so there was that piece that I would kind of like
barely remember
cheer him on in the morning. I'd be like, you can do this. We have this and this and this. And I need you to like put on a happy face and, go, because I know you're dying inside, but like so I feel like in a way I was kind of like jumping on his back a little bit too.
But even on closing day for our house, I barely remember going in and signing my name and all the paperwork. I was just totally fried.
Okay.
What was happening inside, like mentally, emotionally? So obviously the physical things are going on, but what's going on inside your head and with your emotions?
That nobody else could know unless you told them.
Yeah, I was just numb. In fact, if emotions were a color, everything was just black and white.
Wow.
I was just numb.
Mm-hmm.
So,
mm-hmm. How did the anxiety express itself? Like obviously in your body, but the alarm goes off, and what happens to you?
I think the trigger was just I would go straight to catastrophic thinking.
Wow. Okay.
Can you give an example?
Well, right before we moved here, we were still living in Edmond, and I wake up in the middle of the night. I hate the story. I'll tell you a really bad story. And I wake up to hearing Jeannie say, "Todd, come here, something's wrong." And I look up, and the light is on in the bathroom, in the powder bath. We have a split level house, and it was upstairs in the powder bath towards the living room. And I walk in there, and she's on the floor.
Who is?
Jeannie.
Jeannie is.
And doubled over, and I'm just still trying to get awake. I don't know how long she's even been calling me. But as soon as I get in there, she is clammy, sweaty. She just goes unconscious, and there is no color in her body, and she's just limp.
Oh my word.
Tongue falls out of her mouth.
I thought in all fairness, that was a traumatic experience.
Talk about trauma. I thought she just died, and I've got two. I'm yelling.
You thought she had died?
I thought she had died, and my two of our girls at home, Avery, our third, who was about to graduate from high school, and my 8th grader, are standing in the hallway, and I'm yelling frantically for them to call 911. And I had to pick her up and just back her down the stairs and put her on the bed, and thankfully the ambulance was there in about 90 seconds.
Wow.
But so I've kind of had this history in life to go straight to catastrophic, and then you always plan for catastrophic. You always plan for things to go wrong, and which is great as a Boy Scout to be prepared and always have the things you need on a family trip. But then you take it clear to the extreme, where I just thought my wife had died. The good news was she didn't die. She's right here, but she had a cyst that ruptured in it, and she passed out from the pain.
Wow.
But in the moment, she didn't know that, and so.
And this is in the middle of your.
In the middle of my.
Right in the middle
right
of it.
smack dab in the middle.
And I think we had maybe even made some strides. We were like, okay, we're having some better days, and it just tailspinned out of control from there on.
And kind of hopping forward, I ended up spending some extended time in some intensive group and one-on-one stuff. And what I realized was that we don't live linearly as far as events in life. If you plotted those on a map, it's more up and down, and all those things just layer on top of each other. And so from things that happened as a kid, I can remember us going on a family trip, and I hopped on the train in Vienna and was grabbing the luggage for my family to get on, and I hop on the train, and the train leaves.
Without them?
Without them.
How old were you?
Teenager.
Wow.
Probably about Murphy's age. And you know that all trains don't stop at all stations.
Right.
And there was no cell phone. I didn't have my passport. I didn't have any cash. But you start, all of us, we think about it, we've got things that have, created a trauma, but I was grading trauma like someone that might know that had been in Iraq or Afghanistan and seen terrible things in a war. But it's like, no, you don't grade trauma. Trauma is something that had a severe impact on you, and it may impact me one way, it may impact someone else in my family totally different. But that experience is real, and so I always minimize those things, and we just continue to shove them down and just keep working harder, and never shared those things with anybody. Just
would you clarify? You said I went to a group thing. Would you explain what that is so people understand?
Like we're telling the whole story backwards here. Okay. It got to the point. Well, I guess let me back up a little bit. In 2016, some of the things that I had done. Well, I'd done a host of things. They were going to talk about those later. So I was doing all those things, and I was still stuck. And I was really diligent on those things, but I was still stuck. I couldn't figure out why. And had some family say, "Hey, we know of this place. It was PCS. It's psychological counseling." In Scottsdale, and had a family friend that had gone there, and it was just tremendous help. It was a 8-day program, outpatient. When you'd stay in a hotel and you'd go to a conference area. About 80%, 70% of it was individual, and about 30% was group time. But it was from 7:30 in the morning until 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night, and so you did about 70 hours of work. In a week, which if you went once a week somewhere, that's about a year and a half. So they called it intensive for a reason. I felt like I was in like psych ops or special forces, special training, because there were so many things that they covered that I just realized I had never really dealt with those. I had never thought about that may have been a traumatic event. I didn't think about how it affected me. My focus was always just on other people. So I shoved it down and shoved it down and shoved it down. And it wasn't until I kind of just started plotting out things in my life and, that should be traumatic when you think your wife's just died in your arms. It's like, but inside you, I don't know, you just rationalize it. Oh, man, she just had a medical issue and she's fine. But as I went back and pinpointed 4 or 5 things, and when you stack those on top of each other, you're going, wow, I subconsciously carried that for years, and I hid it in good work and good behavior.
Did you try to hide it, or was it just something you learned to do to move forward?
I would say I hid it.
I think he hid it, but then it would come out just, it would be at our daughters or something, like that he'd go, well, you can't go there because that's dangerous and you could get this and this. And I was like, wow, that escalated really quickly for her to go to the movies. She was dead in a ditch by the end of the night. And it would it would creep in at times. But I think, I think you knew, okay, I shouldn't talk like that. I shouldn't. I think so. He kept pushing it down, even though he was feeling that he may not have expressed it.
But I could trust God for you and these other boys, these other families. But when it came to me and my own family, I was like, oh, it's all up to me.
Wow.
And so all the pressure.
Afraid you're going to lose them? Was that it?
Or just hyper-responsible?
I think
just the responsibility
just being
of it all.
being a responsible dad and being the protector and the provider for my wife and my 4 girls. But it just came out in such an unhealthy manner, and it really was from a position of fear, and also fear, what if I'm not enough to meet that need or take care of that person or deal with that situation or cover the finances in a nonprofit. My name is on the documents for the 501c3, and so I think it all, just as you got older and you got more responsible, and the consequences and the stakes got bigger, just the weight of that. It's a really graphic analogy, but it's like the Twin Towers. Once they started falling, they just pancaked and they fell hard and fast. Everyone's around me looking and going, "Oh my gosh, what just happened?" But reality was it'd been going on for about 20 years, and the pressure just kept building.
So to paint an accurate picture, you're trying to lead your family in a godly direction. You're in ministry. You're an active church member. Did you voice what was inside? Did you all go to other people? Did you have accountability? Did you have a mentor going, hey, this is what I'm experiencing? Or were you keeping that all to yourself?
I kept it all to myself until I couldn't.
Yeah.
And so the line, the marker, if you were to graph this out, my Hello Kitty blanket moment was the point that, okay, I can't hide this anymore. I got nothing else to lose. There's no fear at this point because I'm a 46-year-old man in the floor in a Hello Kitty blanket. So it's no man card punch there. And so at that point, my whole family and my circle, hey, this is not working. And now you are the center of attention and we're going to get you back to healthy, which just added more pressure to me because the last thing I wanted to do is have all the attention and focus on me, but it's a thing that I needed probably the very most.
I would say too, just even for your listeners, if they're going through anything like this, like I think when we got to that point, I think we had tried to Band-Aid it or go, just go pray a little more, or let's go to church, or just, let's go on a vacation. We tried to Band-Aid it because we didn't realize how bad it was because he wasn't,
highly functioning.
Over-functioning.
Yes. Yeah. Highly over-functioning.
But when we got to that point, I think it became very clear that this is not just a quick fix.
Yeah.
This was something, and I think the deeper we got, we realized basically there's three things that we had to address. And it was physical, emotional, and spiritual. And if you think you can just do one of those and get out of this, you would be wrong.
Yeah.
Because, go to the doctor. 100%. That's the first call we made. We were like, we need to get in and make sure that there isn't something else going on. We did all the tests. We, blood work. You take medicine. We got him on a medication that was helping. But that wasn't our only fix. Like, we had to go deal with the emotional piece. Yeah. And so he met with a counselor. He surrounded himself with so many godly men. They came out of the woodwork. It was humbling to watch.
It was really humbling to see these guys that knew me really well that were coming in from all over the country. And then family as well that have just advocated for me, I guess is the best word.
Yeah. And then the spiritual piece. That was, I think, almost the piece that was the essential part. That was like the thing that kind of put us over the top. And that was, you had so many sessions of people praying with you and for you and going to prayer ministry and going to healing ministries. And I remember being at our lake house in the summer and cousins surrounding him and praying over him because they were so in the fight for him. Like they were not going to let him go down. So, but it wasn't until that breaking point that we realized all three of those things have to be included in the healing process.
And really dying to yourself, and really had to die to myself twice. I did that in 2016, and there was about almost 6 years of just like a burn victim and just putting the salve on the wounds. And then once that happened, it's okay, now we're going to get down to the root. I thought I was almost done with that and feeling pretty proud until you're not. And you find out, oh, wow, no, there's more work to be done.
I think that's a great place to pause.
Okay.
So we talked about the beginning. We want to do part 1 and part 2 with Todd and Jeannie. What are some things that you want to point out before we close this episode and go to the second part?
Well, sounds like you had a really strong support system.
Yeah.
Guys, I don't think that's the norm for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's really not. So you'd be so grateful for that.
Yeah.
Did you ask for help, or it didn't sound like you asked for help. It sounded like you collapsed and you had a support group that came after you.
It was every bit of an intervention.
Okay.
But I wasn't kicking and screaming because there was no fight left in me. I had literally left it all out on the field.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to just address that really quickly. I just was thinking about marriage and like fighting, and I think that was like when you asked us to do this, and this immediately came to mind. I was like, there's kind of 3 stages of fighting in marriage. Like early years, you're just fighting with each other. Yeah. Like you just fight about the dumbest thing. No. Yeah. And then, or fighting against each other, I guess is the word. And then, you have kids, you are, starting to pursue your dreams. And so you fight together. You're fighting for your kids. You're fighting for your dreams, fighting for the things that you want and want to pursue. But then there comes a place where you have to fight for a spouse. And that's where I think we got to. Like, I think I was like, and I think that's where he couldn't fight. And I was like, I have to fight for him. And so that's where then I think I was probably asking more than he was. I was like, mom and dad, friends. I mean, I was calling people from across the country and saying, can you come?
Yeah.
Really?
He needs somebody to come. And they were on the next flight. So, I mean, I think that's kind of where I took up the fight for him because he couldn't fight anymore. And I just thought, like, that is such a sweet picture of, like, how the Lord kind of works out our, immaturity, I think, in fighting, and how that's kind of where we got to, is that I had to fight for him because I realized he wasn't going to be able to fight for himself.
Can you guys see where people get divorced, though? They give up because it's too painful or too difficult.
There was every opportunity for us, either one of us, to throw in the towel in that process.
Yeah.
It was not pretty. It was not fun, but it was such a picture of who God is in our life and how He does fight for us. And it's not up to us. It was never up to us or my ability. And so that was the huge shift in mindset and identity that I think we're going to talk about in the next podcast. That it was just, it took me to get to that point, to the end of myself, and allow myself for someone else to fight for me and for my highest good.
So, were you guys both in leadership positions at different times during this?
I mean, I was still just kind of momming
Don't
it.
say just mom.
It's just momming it.
But you had been you had been in an administrative role with the OTA before we partnered with some family, and they invested in us and took over all the back office things. So even at the ranch, she was the administrator. She kept me from being overdrawn and kept us all street legal on all the things.
The reason I ask that is because on the outside, everything looks like it's okay. Not that you were wearing masks, but when people see you as leaders, either in the home or in business or in church or whatever, people can assume these guys are good to go.
Yeah.
And you guys come from at least Jeannie, from your side of the family, you guys come from a solid family heritage. Is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely.
So it's easy to say, oh, they're part of that family. They're good to go. They have no problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we love your stories, because if somebody on the outside looking in, they could have easily judged like, oh, well, everything's all good. And then, boy, it's just such a big lesson in asking the questions, getting involved in people's lives to look underneath. And so we're going to pause here, and then we're going to we'll have a part 2, but go back and listen. If you've listened to this and you've stuck with us this long, thank you. Go back and listen to some key things that stuck out to you. I love that you all talked about the holistic approach. It wasn't just a physical or emotional, here, take a pill. I've said it numerous times. I take a pill for anxiety and it makes everything good. But I have to do the spiritual work and I have to do emotional work. And that's what we love, is this holistic approach. I think that's what Jesus modeled and showed us. That's what we love about your story. So thank you for sharing all this. We really appreciate and encourage you. We could command you to listen to part 2, because you won't want to miss the rest of the story.
Yeah, that's not the end of the story, thank goodness.
Yeah, thank goodness. So thank you guys for listening today, and stay tuned for the next part. We want to thank you as always for listening. If today was helpful, if something that you listened to was helpful, we would really love it if you would go to Apple or Spotify, leave us a review, download, subscribe, and for all things related to podcast, if you'd like to give a financial contribution to help us continuing bringing this sort of broadcasting to you, just go to FahrenheitMentoring.org.
Hi, this is Chris Corral, producer of the Fahrenheit Real Life Mentoring Podcast. This podcast is produced through a partnership with the Confetti Corral Boutique and Michelle Corral Realtor. To find out more about these businesses who support our vision and ministry, go to confetticorral.com or find them on Facebook.